What is up, everybody? Well, the summer movie season of 2025 is now officially in the rearview mirror. And so what better time to talk about all of the brand new releases I saw during the summer of this year. Now, we all have different criteria for what means a summer movie and what the summer movie season actually is. I'm going from the beginning of May, which this year is when we got our first summer seeming movie, and then I'm closing it off last weekend with the release of Nobody 2. Now, in the past, where summer movie season would only have 2 or 3 major blockbusters, and we would really only consider those movies as a part of a ranking here, there's so much cloudiness with how movies are released today, where you have a lot of independent films and horror films released in the summertime. Of course, we have streaming service films. So I'm just going to talk about everything. Every single brand new release that I saw from the beginning of May until the end of last week, which is 35 brand new release films ranging from big summer blockbusters to independent released theater films to streaming service movies. Let me know down in the comment section below which movies you saw in the summer movie season, which ones were your favorites, your least favorites. Did you think that this summer was a really decent couple of months of movies, or do you feel like there was a recent year that was much better? Let me know all your thoughts down below. With that said, let's kick this bitch off with number 36, the worst film that I saw in the summer movie season of 2025, and a film that has a very strong chance of being the worst film that I see in the calendar year of 2025. And that is War of the Worlds. Now, I saw maybe a week or two before this movie was released, some kind of a press release or an announcement, maybe on Twitter or something, that Ice Cube was going to be starring in a new adaptation of War of the Worlds. And my mind automatically assumed this was going to be like a summer blockbuster movie for like 2027 or something like that. And then one night I click on Amazon Prime, and right there on the homepage is War of the Worlds. And I went, oh my God, this thing's already out. It looks awful. I have to watch this. And for as bad as you might think an Amazon Prime released War of the Worlds film that takes place on a desktop where Ice Cube is the lead could be, I guarantee you it's about 15 times worse than what you're assuming. Now, I have to say right off the bat, I do enjoy Ice Cube as an actor. He definitely has a limited range as an actor, but whenever you give him a role that suits his strengths, I do think that he's very enjoyable. This is not one of those films. Like, no disrespect to the guy, this is not the type of role that you want Ice Cube being your emotional anchor for your story. He's already been memed to fucking death over the last couple of weeks since this has been released for numerous scenes in the film, whether it be making fun of his emotional reaction or to his line delivery, which many points in the film literally looks like he's reading off of a cue card. And just the choice to take a huge story like War of the Worlds that we quite literally got a Spielberg version of, and say, you know what, let's do that like Searching or like Unfriended, where we just watch the whole movie through somebody's desktop. Now, the movie was produced in 2020 whenever there was COVID lockdowns and all these restrictions, so you could forgive a little bit of that creative direction because of that. They were just trying to do whatever they could at the time, but that doesn't forgive how horrendous this movie was. It's no secret that it sat on the shelf since 2020 and then was just quietly dropped on Amazon. And I didn't mention this the first time that I talked about this film, but it's one of the most ridiculous cases of product placement you've ever seen in your life. You have alien invasions and explosions and everything like that, and yet there's like 4 points in the film where Amazon is able to fit some kind of a Amazon gift card line or show something to do with Amazon's Prime delivery service, and then the third act of the film, the entire crux of everything relies on an Amazon delivery driver using the new drone technology to get a USB drive to Ice Cube so that he can save the world? No, absolutely not. Here at 35 is a movie that needs to thank its lucky stars that War of the Worlds is another film that came out the same month, because in any other universe, this would easily be bottom of the list, and that is Happy Gilmore 2. And for a film that I never had that much expectation for, it's still going to end up being one of my most crushing disappointments of the year, because I never expected to be so pissed off and offended as a Happy Gilmore fan. I absolutely love and adore Adam Sandler, him, Jim Carrey, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, these were people that in my youth, any new movie starring them was like an event film. That was the thing to do that year. And all the way up until maybe 2009, 2010, it stayed that way. And then I really started to fall out of love with Adam Sandler's version of comedy, or it just really wore thin. It wasn't as good as it used to be. I'm going to go with the latter. And even more so after he started making movies for Netflix. While I like the dramatic stuff that he's done, I haven't liked a single Netflix comedy starring Adam Sandler. So the writing was on the wall. This was not going to be a film that I was going to think was anywhere close to as good as the original, and probably wouldn't be a movie that I would even enjoy on its own merits. But when I watched it, oh my God, was I shocked at just how genuinely put off, frustrated, and actually insulted I was as a massive fan of the original movie. The story itself is so unappealing, killing off Julie Bowen's character right in the beginning and then having Happy Gilmore turn into this depressed, angry drunk, and the way that they get him back into golf. I mean, all the ridiculous silliness that's going on is not the fun version of Adam Sandler's silliness. It's just dumb silliness. I mean, the story itself that the movie is telling was so unappealing to me, killing off Julie Bowen's character right at the beginning just to turn Happy Gilmore into this depressed drunk for the rest of the movie. And all of the attempts at humor in this film absolutely fell flat for me. About like 35% of it is relying on you laughing at, oh my God, look, it's that random celebrity that must be friends with Adam Sandler and he just walked on set for absolutely no reason. And then the other 65% is, hey, remember that awesome joke from the first film? Well, here's that exact same joke again. And if you don't remember, have no fear, because we're going to show an entire 15-second flashback sequence right before the punchline. I hated the movie. And for even more so than that, I hated the way that the fans of the movie treated everybody that did not like the film. It was the most toxic, miserable, cruel discourse that I've seen on this platform since 2018. And why that is taking place over a Netflix Adam Sandler movie is one of the great mysteries of the world. Number 34, we're going back to Netflix with Fear Street Prom Queen. Now, I did enjoy the original trilogy of Fear Street films. I wasn't quite as high on it as everybody else, but I did like the idea. I thought there was a lot of potential there to have a really fun, adult-style Goosebumps series on Netflix. And to my and everybody else's surprise, it took like 4 fucking years for them to come out with another installment. And this ended up being just one of the most bland, generic, and uninspired 80s slasher throwbacks that I've ever seen. I mean, just in general, look, I love the 80s. Most of my favorite films and music is from the 80s, but I am so fucking burnt out on 80s nostalgia, especially the lazy surface level kind. And that's all this movie is. It's let's give everybody big hair. Let's make sure you show at least one 80s horror film playing on the big marquee there, which they chose Phantasm 2, and I guess I'll forgive them for that because fuck yeah. And then fill the soundtrack with the same collection of songs that every fucking 80s set movie uses. Sweet dreams are made of these. Come on, it's a nice day for a white wedding. You got another thing coming. All right, we can keep that one. And then when you get into the story of the film, it's a prom where all of the prom queen nominees are being picked off one by one. And you look at that premise and you go, wonder who the killer is going to be. I'm going to put all of my money on this person. Oh, look, I was correct. And then even the kills are just boring. They're uninspired. There's one that's mildly entertaining where a dude loses his hands and he's trying to open the door with his nubs. But beyond that, it's just the most generic, been there, seen that 1,000 times style slasher kills. So yeah, I don't know if this killed the Fear Street brand for Netflix, but this absolutely was not a worthy follow-up to the original trilogy. And I hope to God if we ever do get another one, they spend way more time trying to make it at least somewhat interesting and creative. Coming in at number 33 was a complicated one. This is Jimmy and Stiggs. This is the first release for Eli Roth's new production company called The Horror Section, where he's trying to preserve like unrated horror and try to keep it away from studio interference. And I love what that stands for. And what I love about this movie is that it is absolutely a DIY horror film. You have the writer-director Joe Begos, who I really enjoyed one of his previous films, VFW, who basically just made a film inside of his apartment. His apartment and all the set design and all the creature design and practical effects and even a lot of the camera work is all done by him. And when you watch a lot of these aspects of the movie as somebody who really enjoys film, especially when you see at the end of the film when they're actually doing like a behind the scenes interview with Eli Roth, it really brings a lot of charm to all of this. And you just can't help but marvel at how the fuck this guy did this. Like if you gave me all the tools that he had, all the little bit of money that he had, I wouldn't even know where to begin. But beyond that, I did not enjoy the film whatsoever. I found it to be like an endurance test. This is one of those movies where you watch it and you go, you know, that would have been a really badass like 15 minutes short, but it's 90 minutes minutes long. You have a guy that feels like he's in the middle of an alien abduction, and he's super paranoid, and eventually his friend Stiggs gets brought into the situation, and they're basically just holed up inside of this apartment trying to ward off this alien abduction, and it basically cycles through the same 3 scenes. It's either Jimmy by himself just like ranting and raving and being paranoid, or it's a scene where he is just like verbally berating Stiggs as his friend and he's super paranoid with him, or they're fighting off these, practical but very campy and cheap looking aliens, and it just goes through the motions with those 3 scenes over and over and over again, with dialogue that honestly feels like Rob Zombie on his worst day, where every third word is like fuck, fucker, fucking, motherfucker, and it's like, I cuss like a sailor, you guys know this, and even I was getting like mentally numb of like, can we say anything else? Enough with the fucks. And so it actually got to a point where I was like, I'm getting exhausted with this. It's got to be close to being done, right? Fuck, 30 minutes in. So I love what the movie represents. I love the work that this production company is doing, and I hope to see some things very soon that I actually enjoy. But yeah, this is not a movie that I would ever watch again. I don't even know who I would recommend it to, but it is very much going to be a love-or-hate style film. You can appreciate the filmmaking, but really not enjoy what actually came out of it on a story or a character level. Number 32 is Sister Midnight. This is a film that I saw at last year's Fantastic Fest. It was my least favorite film of that festival, and I don't know, it's one of those movies that I always feel a little bit awkward putting so low on a list because it's a very low budget movie that is trying to do something unique and creative. I do think there's a cultural difference here, like a bit of a block for me where I don't understand the Indian culture that they're going for here, and so it's very much like a film commentating on that culture with arranged marriages and things like that while trying to spin this little bit of a vampire spin in there that's even hard to describe if I was to hone in on that. So I don't know. It's a movie that just I didn't connect with. I didn't quite understand. And because of that, I felt like it was very long, drawn out, and very boring to me. But I would not be surprised at all if the person sitting in the same theater with me loved it and totally connected with everything. So this is one that's it's just not made for me. Number 31 is going to be The Home. This is a horror film starring Pete Davidson that takes place in a retirement home, and the writing was on the wall. This was not going to be very good. And when I got there and saw it, yeah, this had a lot of potential to actually be one of the worst films of the year. But oddly enough, there's some aspects of it, especially in the third act, that I think I would rather rewatch just for the entire ridiculousness of it. It's a film that's got an initially creepy concept about this guy who's a troubled youth that gets assigned for like community service to be a super at this retirement home, and all of the tenants of it take to him, but they're also like a little off with how friendly that they are. And then he starts to realize there's some sinister things going on. There's a certain floor of the place he's not supposed to go into. Naked old people are showing up in random spots. And the shame of it is the entire supporting cast are a lot of veteran actors, but they're all being led by the dramatic chops of Pete Davidson. And I have no hate for the guy. I don't necessarily think that he's funny, but he does not have the chops to do anything that this movie requires him to do as the lead. And so you're just going through the motions of this very bizarre story with even more bizarre reveals, with a lead performance that cannot sustain all of it, and then it goes balls out in the last 10 minutes and turns into an absolute gore-fest massacre, which is the one thing that redeemed it from maybe cracking the bottom 5 of this list. But as is, it's a film that I would absolutely tell you not to waste your time with unless you can watch it for free with a group of your most obnoxious friends. Maybe one of them being a Pete Davidson fan. Number 30 is The Surfer. This is a film that I saw at South by Southwest back in like March, and it is a new Nicolas Cage film, and unfortunately it is now the final performance of Julian McMahon. God rest his soul. I'll always love Christian Troy. And my buddy Sean Chandler describes this in a pretty spot-on way by saying it's gaslighting the movie, and it's basically Nicolas Cage where he goes back to Australia. He goes to this beach that he used to surf on when he was a kid, and he's trying to take his kids surfing, but all of the big violent locals will not let him on the beach. And so he's essentially stuck in this little parking lot in front of the beach, trying to figure out a way to get on the beach or at least get out of the parking lot. And just so many little weird things happen that just absolutely makes him descend into madness. It's a film that, much like Sister Midnight, I think you're either going to connect with it and really love it, or it's just absolutely not for you. And judging by how low it's on this list, I'm sure you can guess which camp I belong to. I mean, Nicolas Cage is doing some fascinating things at this point in his career, so I'm always curious to see what he does. I do think he gives a good performance, as does Julian McMahon. but it's a film that's pretty exhausting by design, and I just never really connected with or fully understood what kind of message or what metaphor they're going for here. It just ended up being a film that just kind of puzzled me. Number 29 is going to be Witchboard. This is a film that I think I had on my most anticipated list back in like 2023, and it's just now seeing the light of day with almost no marketing, no press releases. It was just kind of quietly dropped into like 1 or 2 screenings in a local theater of mine. So I checked this out and was curious about it just because it was written and directed by Chuck Russell, who is the guy that gave us not only The Blob from, 1986, 87, but Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, which you guys know is like life to me. Also The Mask, and also Eraser. I always like that movie too. So yeah, this is a remake to a film that came out in the 80s, which I have never seen. And this one, I don't know how closely the stories are tied, but it's about a girl who finds this haunted witch board, which is something that witches used to use to basically like determine people's fates. And the more that she uses it for her own personal gain, the more that these grim fates befall all these people around her. And eventually it leads to kind of like this body swap situation where the witch that actually cursed the board swaps bodies with the lead girl. And the shame of it is once it got to that body swap situation, like to me, that was a really interesting place to go with the story. It was a really interesting thing to explore. And the movie doesn't really explore it all that much. Like that's a really cool concept to me of having a witch brought into 2025 and having them try to navigate the modern world while a modern woman gets sent back to like the 1700s and has to navigate, the old times whenever she's trying to not be burned at the stake as people who are trying to call her out as a witch. But that's like this much of the movie. The rest of the movie is exactly what you expect it to be. It's a very cheap, generic, cliche horror film with awful CGI blood, filled with a bunch of actors that aren't really doing their best work here, with the exception of Jamie Campbell Bower, I think is his name, is the guy that played Vecna. He's doing a pretty good job. And so it's a movie that's not worth your time, especially to go watch in theaters, but barely worth your time for streaming. But I will say, for a movie that's sat on the shelf for a couple of years and they absolutely were trying to just bury it and throw it out there, I have seen much worse horror films that get full studio backing and a whole theatrical run, a lot of them from Blumhouse. So it's not the worst, actually. It's not much of a selling point, but, it's not the worst. Number 28, I Know What You Did Last Summer. This is a film that, like Happy Gilmore 2, I didn't really have high expectations for it, and yet it fell so far below those expectations that I ended up being very frustrated and disappointed by it. I think there was potential here to do something really cool and interesting, but it just felt like the movie was such a lazy and cliche version of a legacy sequel, and all of the best and biggest elements of nailing a legacy sequel just did not work for me. The story, the initial setup, even like the caricature nature of the characters is just copy and paste from the first film in a very almost annoying way. The kills are fine, but they're not like this big graduation from the level of kills we got in the original film, which was kind of a soft rated R, almost like a hard PG-13, so that was a disappointment. I don't think that Jennifer Love Hewitt got utilized well at all in this movie. She felt like a guest star here, and that was the one thing that it seemed like she was adamant about, is if I'm going to come back, I want to be an active piece of the story. Well, I don't think her character was at all. Even in the third act, it felt like she was just standing there, had no part to play in anything that was happening. And then the other legacy character we got with Freddie Prinze Jr., I just did not understand or like what they did with this character at all. On paper, there's a really cool ballsy idea in there, but they did none of the work necessary to actually earn that and sell you on it in this film. They just do it to try to have this big left-hand turn. And to me, it borderline ruined anything that was working in the film. And so you end up with a film that on one hand feels like it's trying to reward you for your love of the original with all these callbacks and these original locations and everything, while simultaneously punishing you greatly for being a fan of the original film. Number 27, Karate Kid Legends, an absolutely baffling movie. I was in no hurry to go see this. In fact, they released it whenever I went to LA to go to Monster Palooza, so it kind of gave me an excuse to not have to go out to the theater to check it out. And it was maybe 2 weeks later, I finally went and saw it at a double bill with something that was a new release and knew nothing about it other than the reviews weren't great. And about 30 to 40 minutes into this film, I literally stopped. I was the only person in the theater. Otherwise, I would never do this. I stopped, picked up my phone, and texted my buddy Sean Chandler. And I was like, Are you kidding me? Karate Kid Legends is about a pizza guy who's trying to be a boxer. That's literally the plot of the film. Like, it has nothing to do with the Karate Kid. It barely has anything to do with the actual legacy characters they're selling this off of, which is Daniel LaRusso and Jackie Chan's character. Even the kid who is the center of the poster, he's kind of the side character here. It's all about Joshua Jackson being this pizza owner. There's this pizza shop owner in New York who's like down on his luck and needs to earn money. And so the kid starts to train him to be like a boxing champion. And then suddenly in the third act of the film, they're like, oh yeah, let's make it a Karate Kid film out of nowhere. Now, on its surface, it was superficially entertaining. I did get a couple of laughs out of it. The fight choreography and everything like that had some charm to it. It was fun in the few sequences that we did get with Daniel LaRusso and Jackie Chan fighting together, even though it's like this much of the movie, even though they marketed it completely off of that. But it's an absolutely dreadful Karate Kid film. So I would not blink at all if somebody told me that this is an abomination. For me, I just had so low expectations for it at that point that I almost got some entertainment value out of how ridiculous of a concept this was. Number 26, Jurassic World Rebirth. And, this is a film, I will be fair, I think with time, I will soften my frustration on it. Whenever I get to rewatch it years down the road, I'm sure I will be a little easier on this film. But as is, I was just so filled with hope that this was actually going to be a rebirth, like the fucking film was titled. Like, I was just so burnt by Fallen Kingdom and especially Dominion that as a massive Jurassic Park fan, Jurassic Park was the first film I ever saw in the theaters as a kid, and it was huge. It was very important to me. I was just kind of done with these movies. And then I heard Gareth Edwards is coming in, and we're going to be doing something that's closer to the original films and kind of getting back to the Park movies, less so the Jurassic World movies. And we're going to be titling it Rebirth, and it's going to be about this and that. And I was like, oh, thank God. We're going to hopefully get somewhat back to the entertainment value and the charm and the magic of those original films, while fully acknowledging we're never going to come anywhere close to the original. Like, I was realistic about how good this movie could be. But then I went to go see this at a secret screening, and it's just more of the same shit. Like, it's a little better than the last two films, but I would not say it's much better. And there's certain things that they've gotten away from that were ridiculous in those films, namely locusts and corporate espionage. But it's still making the same dumbass story decisions. It's still relying completely on mutants because humans aren't interested in dinosaurs. Bitch, that's why we're here. And then specifically with this film, it's like two different movies that's battling each other. You have one movie with Scarlett Johansson and this group of mercenaries trying to get DNA on these massive dinosaurs, and you have this lost family like a la Jurassic Park 3 who's trying to survive on this remote island. And the movie is just, it's cannibalizing each other. The entire runtime on which storyline is becoming the main storyline, which characters are our main characters. And the family is just far inferior, but even the ones that we get on the Scarlett Johansson side, there's no character in this movie that's really interesting or compelling. And so by the end, you get a film that is entertaining superficially. I think there was a great action sequence on the boat where they're fighting a Mosasaurus and some Spinosauruses, but beyond that, it's just more Jurassic World shit. And I'm done with that. I don't need it anymore. So yeah, it was a major disappointment. I didn't really enjoy the film, didn't get anything out of it. And for those of you that did, I'm happy for you. I didn't. Number 25, we have Megan 2.0, and much like how I think time is going to be a little kinder to Jurassic World Rebirth as I rewatch it, I think time is not going to be so kind to Megan 2.0 if and when I ever rewatch it. I had a decent enough time with this because I took my girls to see it, and my youngest especially was a huge fan of the original film, and so I just had a really good day with my daughters eating lunch and then watching this film. Your experience watching the film does play a part in how much you like what is going on. But on paper, this was just a lot of really bad, foolish, ill-advised decisions where you have Megan, who I liked the first film. I wasn't crazy about it, but definitely had the potential and already had all the writing on the wall there to be like this new version of Chucky, like this new killer doll horror icon. And they said, that's awesome. Let's turn her into a sci-fi action hero. And so they kind of go the slapstick way of Terminator 2 here, where you take Megan and you pit her against a more evil robot and you make her the hero of the film. And I think there's some entertainment value here. I do think that the silliness works sometimes. I think that the way that you have Megan and these like catchphrases, and they're very much pushing towards like the TikTok generation. There's a lot of times it doesn't work for me because that's just not me, but there's other times where there is some weird version of charm to that. The whole sci-fi angle here with AI versus AI and which one's the more advanced and is going to prevail, like that's kind of a classic trope that I always enjoy. I mean, Terminator 2 is my second favorite film of all time. But if I did not have my daughters there and it wasn't just, you know, enjoying myself with them, if I was just to watch it as an adult that didn't have any kids, I don't think there would be much here that would really entertain me. I mean, significantly less than the first film, where it's just a very campy, goofy film that's telling vagina jokes and has okay action, but I don't know. This is a weird one. This is one that did not offend me. It's one that did not impress me. It's a movie that happened and I'm like, okay, well, that was a Saturday. Number 24, we have Eddington. This is the fourth feature film by Ari Aster. Watch, he had one before, Hereditary, that I didn't know about. People are going to correct me on that one. It's his follow-up to Beau is Afraid. There, we'll just do that and be safe. The newest Ari Aster film that is a COVID-era Western. You could not have described a film that I would have inherently had less interest in. An Ari Aster film that is a Western set during 2020. No fucking thanks. But the few burdens of this job is sometimes I have to watch things that I don't have interest in. And so I went to go check this out. And I gotta be honest with you, it wasn't as insufferable as I thought it was going to be. You know, I really like Hereditary, for the record. I don't know if everybody knows my thoughts on Ari Aster, but like Hereditary quite a bit. Did not really enjoy Midsummer, though I respect certain things about that movie. Absolutely hated Beau is Afraid. And I think that Ari Aster fans and, you know, Ari Aster stans are some of the most insufferable movie fans to ever interact with online. So just walking into another film of his knowing I'm gonna have to speak about it publicly is an endurance test in and of itself. But for a movie that has all that baggage, plus is talking about an era that I think all of us are ready to just forget and never talk about again, there's some interesting things going on here. I think that the initial rivalry that's set up in a very like Western showdown style between Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal is interesting. I think some of the film's commentary and exploration of how many different people just went absolutely bananas during 2020 and all the weird and ridiculous and obnoxious and nonsensical things that people on all ends of the political spectrum were doing during that year. There's definitely some satirical appeal there. You know, I don't think we're far enough from 2020 to fully enjoy it, but still there's elements that I can get a little bit of what they're putting down there. And the movie certainly gets pretty crazy in its back half, certainly its last third. But the middle hour of this film was an absolute slog to get through. As soon as they start getting into like the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd stuff, it felt like the movie just was dragged down to an anchor, mostly because they're just exploring a lot of the riots and more specifically, and you have to watch the movie to understand what I'm talking about here. More specifically, how like young white kids were entering into the BLM movement and everything. It highlights how ridiculous and like annoying certain people were, especially online, chronically online people. And so it's just like living in that world for an hour. It was like, oh my God, please fucking move on to something else, please. And then by the end of the film, it leaves you a little bit empty because it feels like the movie isn't really making any kind of a hard statement. It's not really leaving you anything to like as a commentary for you to walk away and debate or unpack. It's just like shining a spotlight on everybody. And the difficulty, or at least the weirdness that comes along with that for me, is I'm somebody who I've always felt is very much in the middle politically. There's a lot of things that I lean much more on the left. There's a lot of things that I lean much more in the right. But I don't understand, nor do I value the mindset of I have to be hardcore one side or the other on every single argument. And so when you have a movie like this that is trying to somewhat adopt that philosophy of like, look how wild both the extremes of both political sides are, it feels awkward to get that message from Hollywood, where we all know Hollywood, producers, writers, directors, actors, overwhelming majority of Hollywood is hardcore on one side of the political spectrum and very much caustic towards the other side more times than not. And so when you have a film with a message like this that I can get behind of look how wild everybody is and look how ridiculous the political extremes are, I can't laugh alongside comfortably with somebody that belongs to one of those political extremes because they're like, haha, look how crazy we all are. And I'm like, bitch, who the fuck is we? Number 23, Bring Her Back. This is the second film by the Philippou brothers, the guys that did Talk to Me, which was my favorite horror film the year that it came out. So I was very excited for this one, walked into it not knowing anything about it. You know, you could presume certain things from the title, but walked in blind. And for the first, I don't know, 3/4 of the film, I was digging it quite a bit. It still wasn't as good as Talk to Me, but I enjoyed where they were going. I was very much locked in and curious on how things were going to be paid off. It's definitely a very grimy and uncomfortable and nasty movie. And then something happens in the story in the last like 15 minutes or so that just absolutely lost me. It felt like the character arc and the story that we were building up to was just absolutely snuffed out. And then the last 15 minutes were just kind of going through the motions. And I've had a lot of discussions with people about, even those that really like the film, about how that ending is actually like earned and why that's the actual important piece of the story. And you were putting more stock into the piece that wasn't meant to be. Like, I've had all those conversations and I still don't agree. Spoiler alert, but when you have a film that is following the brother of this girl who is going to be victimized and possessed by this evil woman and trying to preserve the life of her dead daughter, and all throughout the movie, the entire movie's journey, character journey, is him like rising above this past trauma and this past guilt to be his sister's protector, and then he just gets fucking drowned in a pool, and then that's it, or a puddle, and then that's it, and then now it's just the woman just has an attack of conscience by the end of it and decides not to go through with it. Like, that was so unsatisfying to me. There was one way that you could have redeemed that if you have the brother get killed in the puddle by drowning, and there's a spot in the movie where part of the lore is for you to repossess a body, you have to be killed in the same way that the spirit you're trying to have possess it was killed, which was drowning. And so for me, I was like, okay, I don't like the fact that you did that, but there's one way you can redeem it and make it earned. If for somehow there's some series of events in the end where the sister either gets killed or gets away, and now the brother's body has to be the vessel for this spirit, this soul that this woman is trying to bring back. And so in a very fucked up, gritty way, he still fulfills being his sister's protector because he protects her from being the vessel. And they didn't go that way. And so it's a film that just, I don't know, it absolutely lost me. I feel like I don't understand at all why they went that direction. It felt like we're just doing cruel things and gritty things for gritty's sake. Even some of the nastier parts of the film didn't really feel earned to me. It felt a little bit forced, which is a word I don't often use, like, because I like gore and carnage and everything, but there's spots where it's like, okay, that character has to behave in the most incredibly stupid way, and that is not how their characters behave the rest of the film, for this little gore nasty scene to play out. Like, what the fuck? You're gonna hold a knife out for a kid to take a bite? Like, what are you doing? Still liked it overall. I'm still curious to rewatch it down the line, but yeah, it was a big drop from how much I enjoyed Talk to Me. 22, Lilo and Stitch. Don't have a lot to say about this one. I enjoy some of these live action Disney remakes as just like a family night out, similar to what I was talking about with Megan 2.0, and this one kind of falls in that category. I like the original animated film. I saw it in theaters when I was a kid. It wasn't like a mainstay for me, but I always thought Stitch was a really charming character. I think that he's the best part of this movie. Anything that focuses on Lilo and Stitch in this movie is really entertaining. Everything that doesn't, I felt completely like just disengaged from it. Like Zach Galifianakis and everybody trying to do the aliens possession and all that stuff was just boring or cringy to me. So not a movie that I would ever rewatch, but I had a decent enough time just having a good night out with the family. Number 21 is Friendship. This is a comedy that I saw from A24 at South by Southwest. It stars Paul Rudd and Tim Robinson. This was my introduction to Tim Robinson's style of comedy, which is like this cringe comedy. And what I will say is that this movie does have some huge laughs in it, but I think my festival experience might have ruined it a bit, because when you watch a movie at a film festival, you do very much get this heightened version of the theatrical experience, where if it's a horror film, you get a lot of gasps and screams and like all those like cliche reactions that make a movie like almost more entertaining. And if you watch a comedy, you get a lot more laughs. The laughs are louder, the whole theater's laughing. And for me, I got like the most obnoxious version of that, where people were dying laughing, like fucking choking on their spit every 3 seconds in this movie over stuff that I just did not understand. Like, sometimes I was laughing with them. Other times I'm like, Why the fuck was that funny? And so the experience kind of wore me thin after a while, where I'm just like, I'm getting annoyed at the amount of laughter is happening that I just don't understand. It's like I missed the punchline because people were laughing or something. So I would be curious to check this out again in the future, but it's a really bizarre, dark comedy. It's kind of like, I think I've seen it dubbed as I Love You Man for Psychos. That's a pretty good little tagline there. So funny movie, not nearly as funny as I think my theater thought that it was, but definitely worth checking out. Number 20, How to Train Your Dragon. Basically insert everything I said about Lilo and Stitch here, only I did enjoy this movie a little bit more than Lilo and Stitch. I thought that this is a animated film that actually translates well to live action. When you have dragons and flight sequences and Vikings and everything, that makes for a very live action cinematic type experience. I don't understand why we have the director for the original film coming in to do like a live action cover of his own movie when the animated film is very strong and holds up very well. So yeah, I mean, as good as a live action remake that we weren't asking for and don't need can be, but I don't see myself rewatching it. Number 19 is Predator, Killer of Killers. This is a film that was an animation that was right directly to Hulu, and it is basically telling the story of these different like warriors. Like you have a Viking, you have a samurai, you have a World War I or a World War II pilot. They're all facing off with a predator, and all of the stories converge at the end with like this big Mortal Kombat style thing. And what I will say is that I'm not really a big animation guy, and it takes a lot for me to really love an animation movie as an adult, but I got some entertainment value out of this. I thought it was a cool concept. I think the animation style was pretty interesting. I know there was like an added extended ending that they brought in like after Comic-Con or something, where it shows Dutch and Danny Glover's character from the second film as a part of this. Weird that they would include that later and not have that be in the actual film, because that could have been a pretty big hype-worthy moment. But yeah, for what it was, I dug it. The only thing that I'm worried about is that I think that that is the entire like the entire concept that the Predator franchise needs to mine going forward, which is have these little isolated stories about these different predators and these different time periods facing off with these different style of these grand warriors. And I'm afraid this movie might have taken some of their best ideas and just got them out of the way with these little animated shorts. And so time will tell. But yeah, I dug it. If you love animation, you'll probably dig it even more than I did. Number 18 is Ick. This is a film I saw at last year's South by Southwest. It came out in theaters for, I think, like 3 days for a Fathom event. It's a pretty fun little sci-fi horror comedy here. And the star of the show is the soundtrack, where it's like all alt rock, pop rock from the 2000, 2001 era. And while I always like heavier music, that's very much my era of music. So it's got so many needle drops where you're just like, hell yes. There's literally a line in the film where Brandon Routh is treating Scott Stapp from Creed like a rock martyr. And I'm like, hell yeah, any movie that treats Creed like the second coming, I'm there for it. But it's a movie about like this alien sentient like root system or something that slowly starts to take over the world, called the Ick, and it ends up being kind of a subtle commentary on how people will completely ignore and be oblivious to like these growing dangers. Just they get stuck in the mundane day-to-day routine. And, you know, it's not a movie trying to make any grand statement, but I thought it was clever enough. And so I had a good time with it. So whenever it comes to VOD, I would say check it out if you like horror comedies, if you like the 2000, 2001 style music especially. But yeah, it was a fun one. Number 17 is Life of Chuck. I was able to see this a little bit early whenever I was in LA, and actually Mike Flanagan, Tom Hiddleston, and Chiwetel Ejiofor showed up after the movie for a quick little Q&A. So it was a neat experience to see this film. And I don't know, it's one that I think I still kind of need to sit on. It's one that I need to like give a lot of time to. It's very much not what you expect from Mike Flanagan. It's not horror at all, although there's like moments that are a little eerie. It's a film that is told in 3 chapters that are going in reverse, and 3 totally different tones of a movie, and it's telling the story of the life of this character, Chuck, who in the middle chapter is played by Tom Hiddleston. And ultimately what it is, it's a movie that's a reflection of life and a reflection on how we impact others, how even just the most seemingly normal and inconsequential human being can impact so many other people and have these ripple effects all throughout so many other people's lives. And It's a movie that has a very profound message to it that I definitely like. It's got great performances, especially Mark Hamill in here really stands out. You get one scene with Matthew Lillard at some of the best acting he's ever given. You know, no surprise, Mike Flanagan is outstanding as a director as far as working with actors and getting great performances out of them. But the structure of the movie is very odd. First act is very sci-fi, trippy, borderline Twilight Zone. Second act is basically a musical. Then the first act is like a coming-of-age film. And I don't know. It's very bizarre. It's such a unique film with a unique voice and a unique structure that you're either going to connect with it immediately and just hail this as one of the best stories that you've ever seen, or at least seen this year, or you're going to be like me and like not really be 100% sure where you stand on it. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad I get to see something very different out of Mike Flanagan, and I think it shows a lot of his strengths continuing to get stronger. But I don't know. I don't know if this movie completely works for me as is. It's certainly unique, though. Number 16, we got 28 Years Later, another film that obviously I like. It's halfway up the list, but is probably going to be one of, if not my most disappointing film of the year, because this was my most anticipated film of the year. I absolutely love 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting, like all of you, for them to finally come back and do more movies in this franchise. And I thought the trailer was incredible for this. And I oftentimes don't watch trailers, but it's one that doesn't really show much. It just kind of creates this eerie, dreadful vibe. And when I went to go see it, I was incredibly puzzled. I think the movie's shot great. I think that there's some great performances here. I think that the gore and the things that we get are definitely nasty and fit with the tone of 28 Days and 28 Weeks Later. Very curious decisions, some that I like, some I'm still puzzled by on how to like evolve and advance the infected in the movie 28 years after we last saw them. But the overall story here about it being kind of a coming of age story for this kid and him trying to find a cure for his mom's illness and having these alpha zombies running around, and like there's things about it that I like. There's some things about it where it just feels like I've seen this movie so many times before. It's just in the 28 Days Later world. That's the only thing that really makes it feel unique to me. And then the way the movie ends, bizarre doesn't quite say it. Like, I know we're going to get the second film in January. It's going to be all about this group of fucking Power Rangers, whatever the hell it was. But it really felt like the movie stopped and then a completely different movie took over in the epilogue. And it just left me puzzled and kind of turned off. And I walked out of the movie almost disliking it. But the more I sat on it, the more I started to appreciate certain things about it. But it's absolutely not what I was expecting. Sometimes that's a great thing. Sometimes that's not a good thing. I think in this case, it's not the best. So we'll see. When we get the entire completed trilogy of this new 28 Years Later story here, maybe I'll go back to this first chapter and appreciate it more. But as is, bizarre and confused is the two words that I would use to most describe my emotional reaction to it. Number 15, Fantastic Four, The First Steps. Very solid movie. You know, I'm not as high on it as everybody else. I've seen a lot of people say it's the best Marvel movie since whatever, and, you know, it's in their top 10 or it's, you know, in their top 5. Nowhere close for me, but I did enjoy it. I think that it's the best Fantastic Four film that we've gotten so far, although I do enjoy those Tim Story films more than most. But I like the casting here. I like the way that they're all characterized. I think that the special effects were, for the most part, all pretty good. I enjoyed the fact that it was its own world. It had like this Jetson aesthetic to it. I just didn't think that the villain Galactus, even though him being like this comic book favorite, was very interesting. I didn't think he's a very compelling villain at all. I don't think it led to any memorable action sequences or fight sequences. And overall, the movie, it's not really a story or an experience that I'm like going to be dying to go back to. So I saw it. I went, okay, cool. At least it felt like a complete film that told its own story, had its own vibe, didn't feel like it was weighted down by all the other projects it needs to set up and pay off. And it was able to just be this singular vision. That is a step up for me from a lot of recent Marvel, so I'll take it. Number 14, The Naked Gun, one of the biggest surprises of the year so far. So those of you guys that have watched me for a while or saw the 31 on 31 night of comedy we did a couple years ago know that I am absolutely not a guy who gets into parody or spoof comedy, with few exceptions. I had movies like the Mel Brooks films and Airplane at the bottom of my list of these comedies that we were ranking. I just don't get it. You know, it's not my style of humor. It can get a couple of chuckles out of me, but it wears thin very quickly, and it never gives me like this guttural laugh. So I walked into this expecting to have a similar type of experience. And for the record, I've never seen the original Naked Gun films. I tried to find time to watch them, but I've just been so busy lately. I just said, okay, fuck it. Hopefully I don't need to watch them to understand the humor here. And there was like maybe one or two jokes that I caught that were in reference to the originals that I could still appreciate. Like the one that was in the trailer about O.J. Simpson. I don't need to have seen the Naked Gun to understand the joke being about the legacy of O.J. Simpson. But what I will say about this film is that it is by far the funniest spoof style comedy or, parody style comedy that I've seen in a very long time. I think the first 15 minutes or so of this movie was just relentlessly funny, where it's like laugh after laugh after laugh, where you even kind of miss some jokes because everybody's laughing. And there's a sequence in the middle of the film with a snowman that was just absolutely hysterical. I think Liam Neeson's style of comedy is great and such a untapped resource that I think this is going to now become like his third wind of his career, where like Taken gave him this little action thriller wave. Now he's going to be starring in a lot of comedies because he just has this dry deadpan style that works perfect for this style of film. A lot of great sight gags. I will say, though, which I think is going to hurt me more than it hurts people that love these types of films, is that it did start to wear thin. Like the third act, I can't remember anything funny that happened just because by then I was kind of just exhausted with it. But I really did enjoy this movie, and I would like to see it again at some point. And coming from me, that's huge praise. Number 13, Summer of '69. This is a comedy that I saw at South by Southwest that was released to Hulu this summer, and I just really enjoyed this as kind of a throwback to like 90s, 2000s sex comedies. It's not like the best written or like, this marvel of this next wave of comedy or anything like that. But if you grew up watching things like Road Trip and American Pie, to me, this tapped into a lot of that charm that I have not seen in a very long time, where you have this girl who's kind of the nerdy one at school, and she's got a crush on the hot popular guy, and she hears through the grapevine that he's broken up with his girlfriend, and his favorite thing in the world is to 69. And so she, very much in the style of Risky Business, goes and becomes friends with and hires this stripper to like give her a couple of weeks of training on how to seduce and do 69 with the popular guy. And so it's a movie that very much is playing on Risky Business, of course, a little bit of like Breakfast Club and American Pie. Like, I'm not saying it's in the vein of how great and how classic and iconic those movies are, but it's pulling from some of those and the charm from some of those. And I just thought it was really funny. I thought it was really entertaining, and I really appreciated it. It's not going to be a comedy for everybody. There's a lot of people out there that actually thinks that the era of comedies that I hold most valuable, like American Pie, are like the bottom of the barrel. If you think those movies are trash, this is not for you. If you're like me and has been waiting, like, when the fuck are we going to get some of those? This, to me, was a nice little version of that. Number 12, Strange Harvest. This is a film that was released to theaters. It might still be in theaters, but it was very, very limited. And I saw this at Fantastic Fest last year. And it's essentially a low-budget mockumentary where it's told very much in the style of a lot of these Netflix serial killer documentaries that we get a lot nowadays, only it's a lot more about the occult and supernatural, and it's, telling a story, obviously, about this fictional killer who's returned to killing after like a 20-year absence. And what I loved about this film is that, to me, they did such a fantastic job at the mockumentary side of things. Like, you could play this movie for somebody that loves serial killer documentaries and not tell them that it's a fictional story, and it would take like 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, before they started to raise their eyebrows of like, is this shit real? Why the fuck have I never heard of Mr. Shiny? This is wild. And so it was just a really nice breath of fresh air for me, especially during the actual festival where you're watching a lot of movies. So I would say if you like true crime, if you like serial killer documentaries, this is the filmmaker who made Grave Encounters, which I still have not seen, but I've heard fantastic things about it. So if you're a Grave Encounters fan, I would say to check this one out. It was very impressive. Number 11, we have Ballerina from the World of John Wick, or the Book of John Wick, or a John Wick Story, whatever fucking weird subtitle they're deciding to use nowadays. And I enjoyed this film quite a bit. This is one that I really love the John Wick films, especially the last one that came out. And so I'm still very much invested in seeing more out of this world. And Ana de Armas, I think, absolutely delivers. I think that she is a bona fide action star in the making, and it doesn't feel like a downgrade from John Wick in any way. She still kicks ass, but just in a very different style. And it's even kind of woven into the movie's plot in her training, where they're like, you're going to be fighting a lot of giant dudes who are going to toss you around the fucking room like a paperweight. So you have to like fight dirty and bite and do all this other shit. So for those of you that get really up in arms about girl boss movies, this is like the anti-girl boss movie. And so I enjoyed the way that they wove her into this story. I thought the action sequences were great and only got better as the movie went along. I would say that the most unnecessary part of the film, oddly enough, is how they weave in John Wick. To me, it almost felt like a distraction. Like, he's not bad. It's not like I hate seeing John Wick here, but it didn't feel like the movie needed that. And the overall story about how she's basically trying to get revenge for something, it's a very cliche plot, but these are the types of films where as long as the action delivers, and they really do here, you can forgive very cliched or uninteresting type writing or plots. And so for me, this delivered. I would say that it is my least favorite of all the John Wick films, but I like all of them quite a bit, so that's not a huge knock. Number 10 is Clown in a Cornfield. Saw this at its premiere at South by Southwest, and it starts off for the first half hour or so as just a very run-of-the-mill clown slasher, and that can be very entertaining, but for me, I was like, I wonder what the big deal is with this movie. Why is it premiering here? And then something happens in the plot where I go, oh, there's the movie. And so it ends up being something that was very unexpectedly fun, and it very much sneaks up on you with its little twists and turns and how this is very much a different style of clown slasher film. Got some pretty nice kills in here. It's got some fun characters. Kevin Durand in here as like the mayor of the town. Absolutely love that guy. I actually got to meet him briefly after the movie, and he was super awesome to me, as well as my buddy Sean. So that makes me like the movie even more, whether that's fair or not. And so I think as somebody that really likes slashers and likes scary clown movies, whether it's It, Terrifier, this is a nice little addition here. So I had fun with it. Number 9, Thunderbolts, also known as The New Avengers. Like, what the fuck's the official title to this movie? Have they ruled that yet? But yeah, this is for me a movie that was a nice return to form for Marvel. To me, this was like the first sign that this year might actually be a really good year for comic book films, which we have not had many of lately. With few movies being exceptions. But this is one where, just like with Fantastic Four, it felt like, oh, a movie that was allowed to be its own thing. It didn't feel like it was reworked in the editing room and reshot all to hell and is bogged down with paying off 4 different movies and setting up 5 different Disney Plus series. It's just a movie that at its heart is about mental health and grief and things like that. And they do it in a way that I think isn't, it doesn't lose the comic book action blockbuster side of things. Like, it just kind of styles the action sequences and, colors its characters in a certain way that's a little bit unique. And so I appreciated that. On its surface, this felt like it was going to be another like Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy style film, which are great, but we've had a lot of them. And this ended up being something that I really appreciated and had a lot of fun with. And by the end of it, it was the first time that it felt like I actually understood what we're building to and the direction that we're heading now in this multiverse saga. And I get an idea of how the world is now going to be kind of coming together leading up to these new Avengers films. So just like with Fantastic Four First Steps, not a movie that I was nuts over that I'm going to like rush out and see again. I haven't even bought the Blu-ray yet. But as the one-time watch in theaters, I was like, okay, we're heading back in a good direction, Marvel. Let's keep going. Coming at number 8, we got Nobody 2. Now, when the first Nobody came out in 2021, I believe it was my favorite movie of the year. Now, granted, it was 2021, so we didn't have a lot of new releases, and I had not gone full-time yet, so I was not watching near the amount of movies every year as I am now, but I genuinely did love that film. And so I was very much looking forward to this one. And what I will say is that if you really like Nobody, I think you'll at least enjoy this. I could see some people thinking that this one's more fun and they like it more. I could see a lot of people, and have seen a lot of people, say that the more comedic and silly route this one takes was a huge downgrade and they weren't the biggest fan of it, but still had some surface level entertainment with it. It's a guy with a certain set of skills beating the shit out of a lot of bad guys type film. And if you like those types of movies, I think this is a fun time. I enjoy Bob Odenkirk a lot in this role. I think that he absolutely delivers in selling us that he can kick ass and just clear an entire room of guys, maybe even more so in this one than the first one. I think there's some great action sequences, the way that it's shot and choreographed. There is some really good comedic moments that did get a laugh out of me, and I just had a really fun time with it. And I could see myself rewatching this one quite a bit. I did prefer the first film significantly, and a lot of that does have to do with the push towards comedy. I think that the first film had like an undercurrent of comedy, and some of it was like an awkwardness about the ridiculousness of the situation, where this one's much more overt. And to me, the biggest sacrifice you make with that is that you lose the surprising identity of the first film, where, you know, Bob Odenkirk as an action star is something where you're like, what the fuck? I don't see that. Better Call Saul's going to kick ass. Sell me. And the first film did. Whereas this one, Hutch, while still being a badass, is much more a style of character that fits Bob Odenkirk and wasn't as subversive. Same with Christopher Lloyd, where Christopher Lloyd kicking ass in the first film was like a nice little unexpected surprise, whereas this one, it's like, that's a Christopher Lloyd character. He just happens to have a Gatling gun. So that was a big sacrifice, as well as just the contrived nature of the movie, the over-the-top sense of the third act with the traps and the Home Alone style climax. But with all the flaws here, definitely being an inferior film to the first one, I still really enjoyed myself, and I still very much want a Nobody 3. Number 7, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. And this one is complicated because I think this is easily the most convoluted and messy of any of the Mission Impossible films. And there's not really any other film in the franchise I would even say is convoluted and messy. But the payoffs in this movie, the action sequences, the plane sequence, the sub sequence, a number of others, is some of the most mind-blowing action and some of the most mind-blowing visuals on an IMAX screen that I've ever seen in the theater. So this is a film that very much is getting that boost from just being an outstanding theatrical experience, which is what Tom Cruise very much pushes for with these films. So I don't know what this film is going to do as time goes on. It might not be kind to it. Maybe when I watch it at home, it'll cease to amaze me as much, and the flaws will drag it down quite a bit. But this is what I go to the movies for, especially in the summer, is the experience that Mission Impossible Final Reckoning delivers. I wish they didn't feel so obligated to tie it in with all the other films and reference all the other films and really just pad the film's runtime out with that type of stuff, and, you know, have Phelps's son and everything like that show up that we just did not need. But you take away some of that stuff that bogs it down, and it's still some of the greatest moments in the entire franchise. So as a massive Mission Impossible fan, it doesn't feel right to not put it this high for how much I really enjoyed most of the film. Number 6, one of the bigger surprises of the year, pleasantly, and that's Final Destination Bloodlines. Now, I do think, save for the fourth film, this is a very consistently entertaining franchise that knows what its fans want and pretty often delivers it very well. But I was not as much enamored with the last 3 of these movies as I was the first 2 whenever they were like the new dog on the horror street. And so that, plus the amount of time it's been since the last film, and still kind of having the stench of the fourth film wafting through the air, I was not expecting much from this. This felt like a movie that could have gotten everybody excited and ended up being an absolute shit bomb. And when I went to see it, I was surprised. I was like, damn, you know, that actually came very close to being the best in this franchise. And only a few things held it back from that. But the kills here were great. 2 of them are in my top kills of this franchise, one of them being my number 1 with the MRI double kill there. I thought the characters were really fun, namely the brother with the piercings and everything. I forget the character's name, but at first I thought I was going to hate him, and then suddenly I just fell in love with him within like 2 scenes, and I'm like, that is the best character in this entire franchise. It's shot really well. There's a lot of great tension. There's an interesting change to the lore here, or advancement of the lore, where they're going through, death is going through bloodlines. Like there was an incident that happened and like hundreds of people got saved, and now all the people that those people birthed and those people birthed are now all not supposed to be in existence. So death has been like going after bloodlines for decades. Like that was a really cool story place to go. But for me, the movie still does rely too much on CGI gore. There's some kills that look better than others. There's a lot of room, I think, to do even more expansion of the lore, and I hope in the next one they do push that quite a bit, because it feels like, with the exception of the bloodline angle, we've kind of saw the same movie 6 times now. Tony Todd's scene was incredible too, by the way. That should go in the positives, but and the way the movie ended, it was very underwhelming for me. The last 10 minutes or so is just like, this is how all these movies end. Like, something different, please. So really enjoyed it. It is my second favorite of the entire franchise, and I'm very much looking forward to the next one. Now we're at my top 5, and number 5 is another really big surprise, and that is Dangerous Animals. Oddly, I've seen some people really hate this movie, which is puzzling to me. I'd never thought that it was a movie that would elicit that type of reaction. But for me, it was a really, really fun experience where this is like 70% serial killer thriller and 30% shark movie. And I don't have a good history with shark movies. I love Jaws, adore Jaws, and I adore Deep Blue Sea. Every other shark movie has never done anything for me. So this is now the third film on the list of shark movies that Cody Leach enjoys. And I just like the story here where you have a serial killer played maniacally by Jai Courtney, and he's great in these types of roles where he's able to just chew the scenery, where he takes people and he feeds them to sharks. And I thought it was a really fun, tense movie. I thought that the kills that we get were gnarly enough, certainly nail biting. And I'm like gripping my chair when they're like descending them into the water and there's sharks swimming around. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like you just think about how scary, how terrifying that would be to be that person. And it got me. It worked for me. And there's plenty of room in the movie for them to just have fun with the badass nature of the final girl and her survival instincts and how far she'll go to survive. Might be a little bit too much for some. For me, I had fun with it. So I had a really good time with this one. I can't wait to watch it again. Number 4 is Weapons. This is the new Zach Cregger film. I was a massive fan of Barbarian, and so I was very much looking forward to this one. I walked in as blind as you possibly could. And this is one of those movies that I'm very happy to say, like, I really enjoyed it when I first saw it, but it's a movie that has only grown for me since I saw it. Like every conversation I've had about it, the few videos I've done kind of unpacking the movie and doing the spoiler review and even debating certain things online and, you know, watching and listening to some other people's theories and interpretations of certain things. Sometimes that can bog a movie down for me and I can get frustrated with how many explanations I'm hearing that I just don't enjoy. But this movie, it's only strengthened it. And so I really like the story at play here. I think that it takes a really interesting angle of going for a very, I would say, almost cliched subgenre of horror and like deconstructing and reverse engineering it to where you don't realize you're in that type of movie until like 2/3 of the way in. And that was a really cool way to subvert expectations and give us a different type of experiences while still very much relying on some of those classic tropes of that subgenre. The characters and the performances are all great, especially Amy Madigan. I thought she was incredible in this. It was so nice to see her again. And this might end up being now her most iconic role, which is awesome. And I really enjoyed the structure of the film where it constantly had me on edge. It constantly had me guessing. It was dick teasing the hell out of me with these reveals where it was all told through perspectives and you would like build to some crazy scene and then it would cut off and you'd go back and you'd talk about some other character and it kept doing that over and over. And so all throughout the movie, I'm going through these peaks and valleys of emotions that made for a really cool experience. And so, yeah, I absolutely loved Weapons. You know, this is one that I walked out of the theater and I was like, I really liked it. It's not like in my top 5 of the year or anything. By the end of the year, it has a shot. If I get to rewatch this a few more times and it continues to grow on me, it's got a shot. Number 3 is Superman. So glad to say that I loved Superman. This is a movie that had a lot on its shoulders. It had a lot to prove. It's got a lot to set up. And I'm somebody that for as much as there was a number of things I loved about the DCEU and was so disappointed at how shitty they handled that entire franchise and the fact that it was just kind of cut off at the knees, it was a necessary sacrifice. You know, it was like old Yeller taking it out behind the barn. And so I'm like, okay, we did that. We've all grieved. We've moved on. Now fucking deliver something new and actually stick the landing this time. And for me, I think they did. Now, this is not my favorite Superman film. I still very much prefer Man of Steel. I just have a lot of love for that film. But I really enjoyed what James Gunn did here. I loved all the casting. I love the color and the look of the film is very bright, and the tone and the way the comic book universe is realized is very zany and over the top and batshit crazy, and I kind of like that because it's different. I really like the story here at play with Superman trying to figure out exactly who he is and where he lies on the spectrum of Kryptonian and human, which is kind of a classic Superman debacle, but I like the way that they color it out here. And I like the soundtrack. I mean, there was just so much about it that I had a really good time with. Now, there's, of course, a number of things that I didn't think were great. You can watch my full review for this, as well as a number of films on this list, by the way. I've reviewed most of them. But overall, it's a film that I saw twice in theaters, and I would be very happy to watch it again right now, which as soon as I get the Blu-ray, I probably will do. Coming in at number 2, as far as traditional summer movies, summer blockbusters, this one was easily my number 1, and that is F1, a movie that on paper I really didn't have any interest in. An Apple-produced film where Brad Pitt's going to be an F1 race driver. I'm not a sports guy, even less so a racing guy, and so I'm like, I don't even care. But the more I saw about it, the more that I heard about how like massive of an experience they're trying to make this. It was a lot of the creative team of Top Gun Maverick, and of course I do like Brad Pitt. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I saw a press screening of this one, and I had such a fantastic time with it. I think that this is such a classic blockbuster in all the best ways, very similar to how Top Gun Maverick was, where it just delivered so many things that people that have been watching movies for years have been like, oh, I miss when movies were like this. And that's F1 to me. You get a lot of cliches and tropes, but ones that we enjoy seeing and ones that they do really good things with, where you get the underdog played by the likable movie star. You have the underdog story with two people having a rivalry. You got the romance subplot that really doesn't need to be there, but it's still kind of charming and adds a little bit to the characters. You got the injury halfway through the film and then trying to make the comeback and the ultimate sacrifice in the third act. Like, there's so many things here that's like, I've seen these in sports movies for decades, but it's done in such a good way that it's almost like nostalgically comforting in a way. It's not cliche in a way where you like dismiss it as not being original. You're like, oh, I miss when movies made me feel this way more often. Race scenes were phenomenal. The visuals, the score by Hans Zimmer was incredible. You know, Hans Zimmer obviously is like number 2 only to John Williams as far as composers, but there's times where it feels like you almost hear him a little bit too much. This was a very unique score for him that was very refreshing and fun. I almost bought the vinyl. So I really did love this film. To me, it's one that is just like a good old-fashioned dad movie, and I love those types of films. So if we're just talking about traditional summer blockbusters on this list and we got rid of all the smaller films and all the straight-to-video stuff, this would be number 1 easily. But my actual favorite film of the summer 2025 movie season is Together. This is currently my favorite horror film of the year, and I think it's a strong case that it will end up being my number 1 at the end of the year. I saw this at South by Southwest at its premiere, had a fantastic experience seeing it. Just like I said earlier with Friendship, this was a theater experience where people were jumping and screaming and yelling, and it only made the movie better. And then on my anniversary, I gave my wife the option, hey, do you want to watch Naked Gun or Together? She chose Together, and so we went to go see it, and I got to see it in theaters for the second time, and I loved it just as much. I think it's a fantastic story here that wears its metaphor and allegories on its sleeve, which sometimes I really enjoy. A movie that's not trying to like make you dig through the rubble to figure out what it's about. It's just like, bitch, we're about codependent relationships. Now strap in. Allison Brie and Dave Franco are great together. There's outstanding body horror in the film, some really nice tension. I like the bits of lore here, some of which is explained, some of which isn't, and we got to draw our own explanations for it. There's a number of sequences in the film that have a nice balance of being very tense and wince-inducing with what is going on and things snapping and pulling and fusing together, and then you'll have a great comedic moment that breaks the tension in a really welcoming way. The only negative with the film, which I had the first time I saw it, have it the second time that I saw it, is that there is a big CGI effect in the climax of the film that I don't think is great, and the actual note the movie ends on, like literally the last 15 seconds, I think there's a much better way they could have had that exact same ending note. It just kind of ends on a bit of an awkward silliness instead of something that could have been like an outroar of laughter. So I'm not going to get specific into what that is, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But even with those couple of flaws, I love this movie. To me, it's just so my thing. And it's the type of movie that I just want to show to so many people, even my wife. It was a great payoff for me to have her like kind of quiet the whole movie and like making a couple of those noises when things got weird. But for the most part, she was pretty silent. And then the credits roll, and as soon as it said like directed by Michael Shanks, she goes, Cody, what the fuck was that? Oh, man. Here's to another 5 years, baby. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews if you want my full thoughts on a lot of these movies. And if you're a Superman fan, I also ranked all the Superman films. You can check that out up here. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.